So the Great Prophecy foretold the potential destruction of Olympus, or at the very least, a choice that had the capacity to either save or topple the entire realm of the gods. Civilization as we know it would have died out under the Titans, with only a few small cohorts of demigods and monsters being allowed to live under the rule of Kronos and his forces. And this prophecy has been looming over Camp Half-Blood like a storm cloud for decades. Chronologically speaking, the first we hear of the prophecy is when Maria D'Angelo died, and Hades cursed the Oracle of Delphi to never again pass on her gift to an heir. And this happened in 1939. So ever since then, Greek demigods have been waiting for the fateful day when Olympus may very well die. But there's an entire other camp. Camp Jupiter has also been operating out west, and it stands to reason that a prophecy that significant should have been on their radar as well. So, did Camp Jupiter know about the Great Prophecy? Did it play a role on the western front of the Titan War, and how much did they actually know about what was going on with Kronos and the Titans? We know that the camps have been separated for decades, but Chiron also mentions that he has a council of representatives from other pantheons that he meets with. In the Trials of Apollo, he references Mimir from the Norse series and Bast from the Cain Chronicles, and he makes several references to Lupa the Wolf, who runs the Wolf House for the Roman recruits. The Great Prophecy wouldn't have concerned the Egyptians since they don't have half-bloods, just descendants of the pharaohs who are particularly adept at magic, and the Norse don't have a camp per se, as the entire Magnus Chase series takes place around the halls of Valhalla after their demigods are already dead. So, even if a living Norse demigod made it to 16, there isn't necessarily a big three that they could have been to, nor was there a way to track and train them. But even if this prophecy didn't concern them, it would absolutely have been relevant to Lupa. After all, we know that the Greek and Roman prophecies overlap frequently, as the Prophecy of the Seven could be found in the new Roman carvings that were transcribed from the original Sibylline books, and they are both issued in the same way through Apollo. Octavian is a legacy of Apollo, and the chief augur who is the gift of prophecy due to his connection to Apollo. The entire plot of the Trials of Apollo sees Apollo going through and systematically repairing his means of delivering prophecies, from the Grove of Dodona and the original Sibyl to Delphi and more. So all Greek and Roman prophecies, from Delphi to the Sibylline books, go through Apollo. So Greek and Roman prophecies come from the same source, but when we dig through the evidence, we don't actually see any indication that the Romans knew about the Great Prophecy. First off, we know that Jason is a year younger than Percy, as he turned 16 in the Mark of Athena, and even though he was held in great reverence, it was because of his status of the son of Jupiter, not because he had a potential prophecy hanging over his head. He mentions deliberately joining the 5th cohort since they were outcasts, taking quests that no one else wanted in order to blend in, and not be seen just as his father's son. But at no point does he mention the idea that he might be a child of a great prophecy. This is a massive weight that both Percy and Talia carry at different points in the series, so this would have been a massive weight on Jason's shoulders, which he doesn't seem to have carried. Talia lashed out in the Titan's curse because her birthday was coming up, and Percy carries this burden after learning of the prophecy's existence in the Sea of Monsters. So if they had one, Jason certainly would have known, and he more likely than not would have mentioned it at some point. If anything, he could be relieved when he finds out that Percy was the child of the Great Prophecy and not him, but this doesn't happen. So then we have to ask ourselves, why didn't Chiron share this information with Lupa? Was he deliberately hiding it? What's going on here? First, let's understand that the Romans don't actually have the same set of big three gods that the Greeks do if we go by Roman standards. The Romans don't treat Percy with the same respect, and in fact, Neptune is not nearly as revered as Poseidon is on the Greek side, which might be because in Roman culture, their primary trinity of gods wouldn't refer to Jupiter, Mars, or Pluto, but instead the Roman big three is Jupiter, Mars, and Janus. We know that there are several sons of Mars, and even though Frank wasn't confirmed to be a son of Mars at this point in the timeline, we know that Julius from Camp Jupiter Classified was a son of Mars, and that there are a few others sprinkled throughout the Camp Jupiter. Since the Romans don't put as much emphasis on godly parentage, it's a bit more difficult to gauge exactly how many sons of Mars there were, but at this point it wasn't treated as taboo. This seems to indicate again that the Romans didn't know, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Chiron lied or withheld information from Lupa. Chiron is the director of Camp Half-Blood and the teacher of demigods, but Lupa doesn't fill the same role in Roman society. She doesn't actually govern the camp, nor does she interact with it very often. Her job is to take in Roman demigods and prepare them for the hardships of camp life and the demigod life by conditioning them in the Wolf House first, but this is her domain. She doesn't go to Camp Jupiter because that's not her job. Even if she knew of the Great Prophecy, she probably wouldn't advertise it simply because her entire job was to get her demigods ready for anything. If she did her job well, then anyone graduating from the Wolf House would be able to handle the prophecy, plain and simple. Chiron doesn't make cuts or kick demigods out, so he would be much more concerned since if a demigod fails in the Wolf House, they not make it out. That's the harsh reality in the life of a Roman demigod, so Lupa probably had complete confidence in those who were strong enough to survive the conditions of her training, but there's something else bothering us. If the Roman big three there are not the same, and we know that Michael Varus was a child of Janus, who seems to have made it to his 16 as far as we know, then the prophecy seems to be specifically directed to the Greeks. Children of Mars and Janus seem to be plentiful since Janus, the demigod from Camp Jupiter Classified, is a child of Janus, the god. It doesn't seem to be an anomaly, and this might have to do with the specific wording of the prophecy. It reads that a child of the eldest gods, which might not just be referring to the three sons of Kronos, but the three sons of Kronos in their eldest form. Technically speaking, since the Roman gods were not adopted until the rise of the Roman Empire, all Roman gods are younger than just about every other Greek god that they are based on. We know, thanks to the trials of Apollo, that belief in the gods is what gives them power. So the Roman gods quite literally did not exist until the rise of Rome, and that might be the technicality that limits the prophecy to the Greeks and not the Romans. If the half-blood child has to be one of the eldest gods, then all Roman gods should be disqualified. But unfortunately, this is one of those age-old questions that doesn't seem to have an easy answer. The abridged version of our personal belief is this: that Chiron did discuss the prophecy with Lupin. Even though he keeps things from his students, we believe that he is wise enough to share with his other mythological counterparts, so we believe that Lupin knew, but did not care. She has a much stricter training regimen than Chiron does, so if the prophecy fell onto the shoulders of a Roman, she had complete faith that everything would be fine since only the strong survive in the wolf house. It may have been through their deliberation, however, that they realized their big three gods were not the same, and Lupa may have figured out that it didn't apply to Romans as children of Mars and Janus continued being born over the next 7 decades. The only embargo placed on having children was on the big 3 Greek gods. Mars and Janus never took this oath, as far as we can tell, and even if they did, Frank was born long before the prophecy came to fruition. This means that the gods themselves seem to recognize that this was a Greek problem, and if the gods had the wisdom to understand that the prophecy applied to the Greeks and not the Romans, then this information likely would have gotten back to Chiron in some way or another. This means that no, the Romans don't seem like they knew about the Great Prophecy, since A, it didn't apply to them, and B, knowing it would have implied that they either knew about the Greek camp or found out about the Greek camp, which we know is not the case. If they found a prophecy that doesn't apply to them, then the next logical question is to ask who it does apply to, which didn't happen. But that's why we believe the Romans didn't know about the Great Prophecy. But let us know what you think. If you like this kind of content, be sure to let us know what else you want to see from us, because we absolutely love this series and we want to keep talking about it with you. Take care, friends, and we'll see you in the next one.